So why do you think it's a priority to understand the new generation of employees?
I think it was when I noticed that a client was showing me some information that they prepared for the board, and I noticed that they actually segmented their workforce by demographic age groups, so baby boomers, Generation X and Generation Y. And that made me question my client and say, why have you decided to do that and what's behind it? And she started talking about what she perceived to be the differences between the different demographic groups, and that really got me thinking.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because there are some quite distinct differences, I think.
What have you noticed?
Well, some of the stuff that I've read recently, particularly in reports, has talked to some quite typical stereotypes, and I'm not sure if they're all completely correct, but there are definitely some changes in generations in terms of being more tech savvy. You know, people are on their iPhones, their mobile phones the whole time. They have far more awareness of social media and the impact that that then has on the way that they want to communicate in organisations. And also, I think they've seen their parents work every hour God sends and decide they don't want to do that. Actually, you know, have more flexibility and choice over their careers and the way they want to work. What about you? What have you seen?
I think the same things. I mean, I've been working for a professional services firm, and what's really interesting to me is that they've identified some things that are relatively cheap for them to give away. So as you can imagine, because they're around the end of the financial year, their audit practice is massive and very busy. What they've identified is that it's relatively easy to give people time off in the summer, and that's been very, very highly prized, particularly by that group of individuals who've perhaps come out of university, worked for a few years, and having 6 weeks off is amazing for them because they can do some travelling and they can catch up with family and friends, and that is worth far more to them than a paid bonus, which is interesting because it saves the company money, but it's something that that group of employees really value.
Absolutely, and I think some of the things that I've seen with some of my clients recently is that the bonus piece and the financial reward isn't the be-all and end-all, and actually having more recognition about their contribution, whether that's, you know, a thank you from their manager or I've seen one organisation do sabbaticals and they are awarded as a big deal. You know, they get 6 months off to go and do something they've always wanted to do, and that in itself people prize far more highly than a bonus that they've forgotten about 2 weeks later once they've spent it. Do you think some of the differences are overhyped, maybe?
Well, I think some of them are. I think some of them have been drawn out and slightly caricatured. But there are differences that I can definitely identify. So some of the issues that I notice is that where perhaps for their parents' generation, working for a big brand organisation, a Unilever or Marks and Spencer, would have significant reward of itself. It seems to me that this generation are far less interested in that. As you've mentioned, they're much more interested in organisations which are very tech savvy, and perhaps there's some social responsibility, some sense of purpose that drives them.
Absolutely. I mean, that leads on to some of the work that we've been doing recently, reading the Daniel Pink book, looking at the fact that purpose is something that drives people more than financial reward in itself. One of my clients recently, we were looking at their bonus scheme and looking to identify it with the social purpose of the organisation, so moving it from being a very much corporate-based scheme into something that's more about the share and success.
I think that's absolutely true. We've seen some of that as well, because it feels to me that a lot of organisations have for so long stated that profit is their main purpose, losing sight of the fact that the reasons why organisations exist is to generate profit, but to pay tax and to provide employment for people. And I think that the Generation Y group are starting to look at that and say, that's not enough for me. It needs to be more. There needs to be more to my life than this. And so some of our very big organisations might find that they need to really rethink their messages in order to attract the very best Generation Y individuals away from smaller, leaner, more dynamic and innovative organisations into what they perhaps perceive as rather corporate giants that perhaps aren't flexible enough.
Yeah, and I guess also the whole piece around equalising status. So traditionally, a lot of organisations had status-related benefits, and I think some of the things we've been seeing recently is that organisations have been aligning their benefits with their values. So if we're all in it together, then actually our benefits should be as well. Why would you differentiate on hierarchy? and status in the organisation.
Yeah, and certainly there seems to be a move away from reinforcing that with things that have traditionally always been done, like car parking spaces and offices and those type of things. I can see that happening as well.
Yeah.
So what are the implications for reward?
I definitely think organisations need to be more transparent and open with the way that they're approaching reward. Generation Y people, those guys of a younger age, they know how to search the internet. They're looking on websites such as glassdoor.com for reviews on organisations and what their pay policies are. So organisations can't get away with hiding their pay policies in the dark anymore and expecting people to be happy with that.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And I think also the other thing is that we've talked quite a lot about employee engagement and that transparency being an absolutely key part of it. It's interesting to see whether people's perception, the Generation Y perception, will change as they get older and further up the organisation. They might join the dark side and be more comfortable with their pay being secret. But certainly I agree with you. There's an expectation that information should be available for them to find, the sort of open code approach.
Absolutely.
What do you think the transparency means in terms of framework and structures, though?
I think organisations have got to be a lot more careful about the way they structure pay. So whether they put in place pay frameworks, have underpinning job evaluation systems, they don't have to be the most complex things in the world, but definitely having a bit more structure to it so that managers can explain the way that pay policies work in organisations. What do you think?
I think that's true. I definitely agree with what you're saying about empowering managers, because I think that from our point of view, we notice that sometimes that first line manager group can be fairly inexperienced in talking about pay, and giving them the confidence to be able to do that helps to engage those employees. I also think that the whole equal pay thing, or just generally pay discrimination, whether it's around age discrimination or ethnicity or gender, I think all of those things are much more important to Generation Y. They're much less accepting of a difference just because of some, social or gender difference.
No, I agree with you completely there. And I think that work that we've done recently, where we've asked clients about their equal pay policies and their risks, has shown that they are becoming much more aware of the fact that they can't hide it under the carpet any longer, and they do have to do something about it. Yeah,
that does seem to have gone up people's agenda, definitely. No, it's a really interesting topic, and I look forward to us doing more work on it.
No, absolutely, me too.